Again. Thank you. Good morning again, and welcome to How to Engage Parents and Family and Community Experts. My name is Janet Vargas, um, and I'm a trainer and a coach with Illinois Action for Children, our community system statewide support team. We offer training and technical assistance to early childhood collaborations and regions in the state of Illinois around community systems change in the early childhood system. That's what we do. Can you all hear me? Okay. Okay, cool. I can't even hear myself. I have these like little ear sets. Again, thank you for joining us. Today's training will be focused around one particular typical parent engagement role, which we'll be going through today. You'll be learning about the role of family and community experts, the benefits of engaging in this role, both to groups that are doing community systems work and to families. We'll go through a 7-step plan to create or and execute a plan for engaging parents in that role. And then we'll also talk about all the information that you get, all the input that you get from families, how to go about making sense of it, and then getting it to the point where you can use it to make decisions about your work. The agenda is pretty much aligned with the objectives. I just want to elevate that there is a 10-minute break around 11:10 or so. So you can plan for that. All right. Thank you all again. I love that you're keeping the introductions rolling in the chat. I have another question for you all in the chat. What is your favorite early childhood song or story? It could be a song or story that was sung to you or told to you, something that you use with your children or your grandchildren. No worries, Kaylin, and everybody who's here. Welcome. And so we are, okay, Goldilocks and the Three Bears, You Are My Sunshine. And Eating Pete the Cat, Raffy song. You Are My Sunshine, The Very Hungry Caterpillar. I'm sorry if I missed some, they're coming in fast. Where the Wild Things Are, Brown Bear, You Love Me, Dr. Seuss. Nice. Does anybody want to share? Like just jump off of mute and share your favorite early childhood song or story. Brownie points if you want to sing it.
Oh, I will sing. Oh my gosh. So I have 2 young children, and it's such a weird song, but it's Baby Bumblebee, and it's like, I'm bringing home my baby bumblebee. Won't my mommy be so proud of me? And then it's like, ouch, it stung me. And then you squish it up and you wipe it off. And so my son is obsessed, and it's literally about a 45-second song. And we do it over and over again in the car, but it has good hand movements, so it's pretty fun.
Thank you, Kaylin. And can I ask, where did you learn it, or where did y'all pick that up, the song up from?
So I first learned it when I was in college, and they were teaching us different songs to use in like our practicum and student teaching. And so it just kind of stuck with me because it was easy. And then one day I sung it to my own kids, and my 2-year-old just couldn't get over it. And it's such a silly song. I was like, I don't know how this has any educational value, but he repeats it, he does the movements. So I was like, it works for me.
Thank you so much for sharing. I appreciate you singing it too. Anybody else want to share what the what their favorite song or story is, and or any interesting connections to it, maybe where you learned it, what it means to you.
I'll go. It's kind of the opposite of squishing up bumblebees, but we I used to do a song all the time with my preschoolers, and even when I did kindergarten and second grade, they also enjoyed it as like a little brain break. And I don't know if anybody knows it. It's called Tony Chestnut, and it's like they stand up and they touch their toes, their knees, their chest, their nut, and then you say, "Nose, I love you." And it's a whole song, and he has a girlfriend named Eileen, and like there's all these people that are friends with Tony Chestnut. It's adorable. I love it. It gets them moving. It gives them a little brain break, and I'm not kidding, like even third graders love it. So it's a good one.
Thank you for sharing. I have not heard of it, but that's really good. Right, one more if anybody feels really strongly about sharing. If not, that's fine. And I see like thank you for some of you sharing on the chat, just that some of these songs or stories are actually being brought home by your children. You're picking up in the workplace. And you have, the classics like Barney. My second grade teacher used to make us sing I love you, you love me every single day before we left. I couldn't leave without singing the song. And she had like a little stuffed Barney that like we would all sing with. Anybody else want to share? I'm looking through all your songs and stories. Well, thank you so much for humoring me with with this icebreaker question. I love kind of reminiscing about how things like stories and songs really bring up memories for us, make us feel good, and how we continue to do that both in the workplace and at home. So thank you very much. All right, you're like we've broken the ice. Now let's get to it, huh? All right, so I'm gonna do a quick background just about like what we mean with community systems. So this kind of parent engagement work, we our team. First of all, I just want to do a disclaimer around the definition of parents. I'll be using parent and families a little slightly interchangeably today, but I just want to let you know that when I say parent, I'm using the Head Start definition of parent, which is, definition is on the PowerPoint, but really it's any adult that shows up in support of their child. And then, so I also want to kind of to help ground us in the type of work, the type of parent engagement work that we're going to be talking about today. So my team and I usually work in early childhood collaboration across the state of Illinois, and now we're also supporting some of the regional work around community systems work. And so just curious, but maybe if you can use a reaction, or kind of if you have your video on and you want to like give a wave at me, just how many of you are either part of early childhood collaborations or like some of the Birth to 5 regional work? Kind of wave or give me a, okay, so a lot of folks. I see some familiar faces too. Oh, cool. just because sometimes we get a lot of, we get folks in different places in the work, and I just want to ground us in that we are going to be talking about parent engagement today, and particularly the parent engagement aims at engaging parents in the community systems and policy work, an area of the early childhood system. I think every training that I give, I feel like I show this graphic where it's like, yes, there's a lot of really great parent engagement happening in programs and services, and it's related to the kind of engagement that we are seeing in community systems and policy. But it's slightly a little different, and so we're going to be talking about it with that context. I see, Amy, you have your hand up. Oh, okay. You're just letting me know that you're connected. Cool. Yeah. And so for those of you who may not be a part of an early childhood collaboration, or you're like, what are you talking about community systems work? It's a way to work in the community at a very like hyper local level where a coalition of early childhood stakeholders all come together and really evaluate and reflect on how they're working together as a system to better serve families. So a group of early childhood stakeholders coming together, being like, what's working, what's not working, and then how can we align services and how can we improve the early childhood system so we can reach all families. That's where we're going to be. And so another piece of background information is our definition of parent engagement. So we define parent engagement in community systems work as both a process, right, like something that is done, and then an outcome, like the results of what is done. And so as a process, I'll give you a minute to read that definition. And as you're reading it, if you can just make note of the ideas or the words that stand out to you. And you can go ahead and go on to read the definition as an outcome. And thank you. I see that you have already putting some thoughts into the chat. So inform and influence, intentional effort, intentional effort. Awesome. So again, this definition is within the context of community systems work, right? Is saying that the process of engaging parents is that is something that is done by early childhood stakeholders. It's not something that just like happens, or like parent engagement is great and it's gonna happen. Like we need to be an intentional effort and something that is done. And that's also a way for families to inform and influence kind of the work to improve the system. And then as an outcome, right, it's not only something that's done, but the results of what's done or where we're headed to is that if parent engagement is done like authentically, intentionally, with support and resources, that it can look like effective partnerships where there is, that shared responsibility, shared power, and our parents and stakeholders are working hand in hand to improve the system. I see more stuff in the chat. Provide opportunity, support to participate, inform, and influence. Okay, cool. This is just a little bit of a background. And when what we realize is that when we are engaging parents at the community systems level, it's important to define each engagement opportunity individually. So just being really clear about, okay, at this point, we are engaging parents for this project or for this effort, and being really clear and convey, for each opportunity, what, explanation of roles and responsibilities, being really clear about like the purpose and intended outcome, like why are we engaging families in this way? Selection criteria is like, which parents are you going to be engaging, or who are you looking for, to prioritize an engagement, time commitment, like how many hours, like if you can get down to the hour, like what you're asking from families, that I think just makes things easier to plan around and easier for parents to decide, like, can I do this at the moment? Can't I? And then support and compensation. And so there is a lot of planning and intentionality around engaging families, which is why um, uh, what we did was look at the state of Illinois and just nationally and see, okay, like what are some roles or what are some functions that parents can be engaged in. And so we looked at kind of what was working across, the country, across the state, and we've identified 4 typical parent engagement roles, because if you define, and this is like a guidance, right? Like I think as long as when you start engaging, when you have in mind how you want to engage parents, as long as you outline like roles and responsibilities, like parents aren't going to be like, oh, I'm being engaged as, an outreach ambassador at the moment, or like as a family and community expert. But you, as a person who's planning, that like you're engaging them in this way. And then if you're clear what, the role that you are asking them to fill, then it's easier for you to plan. And so we've identified these 4 roles. The first one, family and community expert, that we'll be like diving in today, is engaging families to share their input on their experiences with the system. And then collaboration parent leader, or I've also sometimes used community systems parent leader, is a role where a parent is actually a partner and like physically a member of whatever group is working on community systems work, right? Whether it's a collaboration or an action council or a family council, but they're actually part of the work. Outreach ambassador is a role under which parent leaders are hired and prepared to, as a group, go out and do peer-to-peer outreach, where they go out and talk to other parents, where they go out and listen to other parents, and maybe even register them then and there for early childhood programs. And then the role of advocate, which is not necessarily advocating directly like for your individual child, but advocating at a like policy level for or against policy and practice changes that are going to impact your child. And today we're going to actually be having trainings that go into each of these roles, but today what we're doing is family and community expert. I just wanted to kind of give a background on why we felt it would be helpful to identify these typical roles and then what they are or could be. And at any point, if there's any questions, comments, or anything, please feel free to put it in the chat or unmute and jump in. So when we talk about like the role of family and community expert, it's actually the role that a parent is taking on. So anytime that you engage a parent in a way that they give you inputs or feedback on their experiences within the early childhood system, you're engaging them in the role of family and community expert. And some of the ways that we've heard back from parents about their experiences, about their needs and preferences and all that, have been through surveys, focus groups, small in-person meetings, one-on-one meetings. And this list is not exhaustive, but these are the ones that you see most often. And today we're going to go a little bit into, what are different methods to hear back from parents and different ways to outreach parents and target them for this type of engagement. Any questions? So just thinking, right? Like if you this is a question for you all. Like, how do early childhood stakeholders, whether it's a collaboration or an action council or some kind of coalition that's working together to improve early childhood systems, how do they benefit, or what are the potential benefits of engaging parents as family and community experts? So what are the benefits of hearing back from parents about their experience? Parents know what their children need. Increased understanding. Yep, and it provides opportunity for CQI, continuous quality improvement. Yes, ECEC, the workforce behind the workforce. It provides more culturally responsive support. You can gauge quality access barriers to change and improve programs and resources. Yep. I think we're on the same page, right? That actually thank you for everybody that's putting it putting your thoughts down. And yes, when we ask those that are most impacted or the families, we get to learn about local community strengths, right? Not only like the deficits, what's missing, what could be better, but like what's working, gaps or problems in the local systems, like what's missing, community needs and interests, preferences, right? We may think that, there's a particular need, but we can check in with families and they may tell you like, yeah, we need that, but actually we prefer that. And then there's always really, like we're stronger together, and like our families and those that are most directly impact are experts, and their children and their lives. So that's why they also have really great ideas for how we can overcome these problems. And then once you get as a group, once you learn more about all these things, you can then help align community needs and services, right? Like we do a lot of like coaching and training with early childhood collaborations, and a lot of time we're like, let's come up with, let's evaluate and find a community problem around early childhood. And how many problems do we not think about? Like there's so many problems because we care and because we want, to improve things, but we have to start somewhere in terms of making these changes. And when we hear back from those most impacted, well, we can start with those areas that make the biggest difference for families. And then being able to hear from, and we're going to go into a little bit right now, but being able to hear from different groups about how they are experiencing the system allows us then to tailor our interventions differently for different groups that have different needs, right? Like we start to tailor towards different demographic needs instead of, hoping that families fit into like this cookie cutter system. Oh, And then how do parents benefit from being engaged as family and community experts? So like if I ask one of you, if I give y'all a survey about your experiences, what's in it for you? If it builds parent leadership, can you do you mind saying something more about how it builds parent leadership, Lucero? Develop advocacy and leadership skills, or Deb, feel heard and valued. Parents learn how to support their children.
So I think it just helps give confidence and understanding what's available out there to help families. And then by helping other families too, it gives them, you know, the sense of worth that they're helping change it for other people as well. And then altogether that just helps them feel like they can really make change for a lot of people, not just their own family, but others as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I know. I feel like I am preaching to the choir with y'all. But we're ramping up into the actual like strategies. Thanks for your patience. Yes, I feel like all the things that you are sharing, I feel like I even missed some, right? Like the I think main piece, right, is that parents can contribute to building the early childhood system that like reflects their needs and the needs of their community. They become familiar with local groups working on community systems work, like what's out there, services. They also get to reflect on family needs and strengths, right? Like I think as parents, we're always like, go, go, go. And sometimes it's like, wait, hold on, like let me reflect. What is it, that we need right now? And increases knowledge and trust in early childhood system and so many of the other reasons that you all have shared today. All right, so now we're going into actually the steps to engaging parents in this role and getting feedback from parents, right? One of the words that I'm really sitting with lately is just intentionality, right? Like we have scarce resources, scarce time for both families and communities. And so like whatever work that we do, like let's be really intentional about it. And the first step is what is it? Like why ask yourself, like why am I engaging parents in this role? And what is it that we want to learn from parents? Once you figure out what you want to learn, identify okay, which parents you want to make sure to hear from and like which are those that are mostly directly impacted and where can you reach them, who can connect you to them. You can then you'll consider the different methods for hearing back from families and identify who is in the best position to interact directly with parents. We'll talk about a few considerations for setting a timeline, how to draft and finalize parent-friendly questions. We also received in the emails like a bank of questions that is in the handout. We'll talk about inviting and supporting parents to participate. And then finally, how to go about understanding the data to be able to use the data. So let's take a look at some of the ways to think about of why you are engaging families or why you're checking in with families. Different groups or different collaborations or different coalitions or groups. What we found like tend to do one or the other or both. Like some groups do like every 2-3 years we'll do a broad check-in, right? Like a large temperature check, all families, with little ones, kind of see where they're at, what are their needs and preferences, where do they learn about their experiences, and then as well as maybe some barriers that they may be facing. So it's like a kind of broad check-in, broad strokes. And or you can also use this engagement role to do like a focus check-in, more like like shine a very specific light to understand a very specific community problem, and that you can do kind of as needed. And this is also a really good way to, as providers, as people who care and probably have been in the early childhood field, we know, right? Like we have hunches, we kind of have an idea of like what might be issues in the community. So this is also a really good way to double check those like assumptions or hypotheses that we may be having, and that we want to move forward to be like, hey, we think this is an issue. Like, do y'all think it's an issue? Like, and then more than anything, suggesting once you figure out if you're going to do like a broad check-in and or like a focus check-in with families, it's really good to start with a list of what you want to learn from parents, like just a very clear list, so that you can then use it as you're moving through the process to go back and check, like, are the questions that we're asking, are they helping me understand that? Or even at the end, like, did we learn what we said we wanted to learn? So moving forward with intentionality. We're gonna do, so I'll give you a minute to read this scenario, and then we're gonna launch a poll asking what specific information my collaboration X, what might be helpful, like what should they consider kind of setting out as what they want to learn. So I'll give you a minute. If anybody does, is kind of en route and prefers me to read it out loud, I can do that. Just let me know. All right. So Kristen is gonna help me. My colleague is actually my tech support, and I'm so sad that I didn't introduce you earlier. Sorry, Kristen. So here you have Collaboration X, right? They realize that there's a really low participation rate for local preschool groups. And so they're like, they want to engage families, the family and community experts, to see what's going on. What specific information might be helpful for them to get more information about? I'm surprised there's no other question. I would be like context, like, wait, is it a sunny day? Or like, I need more details. We have about 60%. I see folks are still putting in the answers. Oh, poll has been launched, Rachel. I'm wondering why you can't see it. So I apologize, Rachel and Brittany, for that tech glitch. I am going to bring up the questions and the answers in a minute. So some other folks. I think we're done, Kristen, if you want to share the results. And then, so for other, I see that people are saying that it might be also important to ask about costs associated with local preschool programs, cultural competence, language accessibility, poll not showing up, okay, and access to transportation, location. So I see everybody is, well, a lot of you are in agreement that you probably want to consider reasons why parents are not enrolling their children, and then obstacles to children participating in school. And I would even put under obstacles, then it would be things like, is it transportation? Is it location? You know, like these are different things that come under that umbrella of obstacles. And then other, then access to transportation. Thanks. Actually, what documentation do they require? How hard is it for parents to get that? I do agree with that also might come underneath like the obstacles, right? And so the answer, I guess, for this one is all of the above, right? Or all of them. I think it might be important to figure out like the reasons why parents are not enrolling their children in preschool. Questions about the preschool enrollment experience, like is it easy, is it hard, you know, has it been an obstacle? Other general obstacles to participating in preschool. And you could go about you know, leaving it open-ended, like what are obstacles, or even just have a list, right? If you have a list of potential obstacles that you think come up, like they could just be like, is transportation, you know, like an obstacle, is, you know, the enrollment process an obstacle. And then I think, you know, it's also good to ask about possible solutions. And so Collaboration X then would start their planning process, listing out like, these are all the things that we want to learn ahead of time. And feel free to like jump in, and I feel like we're all teachers, we're all learners. So if you have something to share, or if there's a question, or you're like, I don't agree with you, Janet, like please jump in. Parents are emotional, available, too much going on with the family. Yeah, definitely a lot of obstacles. And I would even say, so like even connected to obstacles, right? Like not only, you know, checking in with folks like on what we think might be obstacles, but then asking them, right? Like what would make it easier? Like how can we help? Once you figure out what it is that you want to learn, you then identify which parents you want to make sure you hear from and where to reach them. This is a really helpful graphic that we've adapted from Chicago United for Equity. And it goes about, it's a tool that helps you prioritize exactly like who you want to hear from. So then you can prioritize your outreach and plan your outreach, right? So in the biggest circle and in the middle are those that directly impact, right? You want to prioritize the opinions and needs of those most affected. The orange circle is the secondary impact those are whose opinions and needs of those directly serving or connected to those most affected, and those should be considered. And then, the last ring, the purple, community impact, the opinions and needs of the community should be acknowledged. And so, we use these buzzwords, right, of like directly impacted, and it's like, what does that really mean? Because, we can definitely, if we're working on kindergarten readiness, and those most directly impacted, right, are families with children who are kindergarten age. But within that universe of families, like, who is most directly impacted, right? And who might you need to make a concerted effort to reach because they're not connected to the system at the moment. So I want to do another activity. We have another scenario. If you haven't read the scenario, please do so. We're going to put you all in short breakout groups. So you have the scenario where moving along with the same example as earlier, right? The community asks who wants to learn more about preschool and why families are not enrolling or have a really low participation rate. They did a little bit more digging, and the data indicates that although broadly the community at large, it still has a really low participation rate, that if they look at the data, out of those, the Latinx and children living in deep poverty are even lower, right? They're struggling to connect and to enroll in the system. And so kind of with that in mind, we're going to put you into breakout groups where you can discuss the following questions. So which groups, like taking the graphic that we just saw, if those that are most affected are directly impacted, which groups of families or which demographics are from this scenario are most impacted? And then who is directly serving or connected to those that are most affected, which is a secondary impact? And then whose voice should Collaboration X acknowledge? So who should they also hear from the perspective of the community impact? So what you're doing is taking the scenario and then identifying which groups of families, which demographics fit in each circle. Just answer, these questions. Are there any questions about the discussion? Okay. Some of the discussion questions are kind of what you all came up with. You could do it in the chat. Vicky?
Hello,
Hi.
we're back.
Did you want to share how the conversation went or discussion?
Our group talked about how this is kind of what we do overall, like especially the family and community engagement piece. It's what we do daily. So talking about how who is affected, being that the Latino population is that direct impact, right? Because it's the absence of education. And then we talked about, who's maybe not directly impacted, but we talk about the teachers later down the road trying to catch them up. We talked about that. I don't want to talk about all of them for everyone. Somebody else can chime in, and then as far as directly serving or connected to those most affected, we also talked about the parents portion of this and what the absence of knowledge going into kindergarten might be because the parents, as we put it, only know what they know. So they were talking about how, okay, we did teach them these certain things, but if we don't know what kindergarten readiness means or what those expectations are, we're not going to know that we're lacking. I think as parents, we're always trying to do the best that we can, right? Whether they go to preschool or not. So we touched on that. And then whose voices, we talked about directly going to the families to find out what that is. Is it a cultural divide? Is there a reason they're choosing to keep their kids at home? That's something that we can't change. Because if that's the case, then we all kind of agreed that we would not shake a finger at that's a personal, a cultural choice. And separate from that, if that isn't the case, maybe for the deep poverty, being some other reasons that they could share you directly. So you're eliminating that middleman.
Thank you, Charlotte. And anybody else want to maybe share if they had similar conversations to Charlotte's team, or if something else came up pretty well?
Yeah, we did have pretty similar answers, but one thing that we really pointed out for number 3 is that we thought the child's voice needed to be heard, because even though they are still in preschool and young, you know, they can still be excluded and not, you know, if they can't understand their friends, maybe they're having a hard time making friends, or they can't participate in things outside of school that the other kids are doing because there's that language barrier. So we thought, of course, the parents, but for sure the kids also need to have a voice in this, because if they've been or gone to something and they didn't have a good experience, they may not want to go back. And somebody talked about how they're just as a child, like going through that, what if maybe there's like clothing issues or food insecurities or different things at home that the child doesn't really understand, or they're just seeing all this stuff, and it's a lot for, you know, a preschool child.
Thank you, Kaylin. I'm curious, has anybody engaged preschoolers or children to ask about their experience when you're learning kind of what's working, what's not? And you want to share a little bit about what that looked like or how they went? Or did anybody like consider like engaging children and then you decided against it? Or are planning for it in the future?
I think the one thing I would probably say is that you have to be very careful and tread on that line lightly, because it is up to the parents on whether or not you are engaging their child and asking them their opinion, especially when it comes to cultural differences. Like, I don't care whether my child wants to do this or not. This is our culture and this is the way we do things, and you are not going to tear our family culture apart. So I think that probably needs to be kind of a line that we don't cross. So I would maybe push it up to that line and kind of see where it goes before I would ever just engage the child. I have been in houses though with undocumented who are terrified to have any program in their home. And so they don't want those home visitors. They don't want those children out in the school districts. And so rather than pushing that or making them feel uncomfortable, we just every week we dropped materials off at their front door, and every week they took them, and and I don't know if they ever used them, but at least it was providing something. We provided videos from Spanish to English, like those kind of things, just different things that would help them. I think that's you have to be careful with that line.
Yeah, I agree. I think for me, I was kind of thinking of like my own child. Like I I always question, like, does she like this? Is she having fun with this? Like, what do they do? What does it look like? And so I guess for me, obviously it's my kid, I ask for a million questions, but you know, it's completely up to the parents. But just curious what the child thinks. I feel like a lot of times we just focus on the parents, but what about the kids? They're the ones going to the program. Do they like it? What do they think would make them more comfortable? And you know, obviously a new 3-year-old isn't going to know or be able, you know, depending on where they are intellectually. But I just thought it was interesting to, you know, kind of point out that kids have a voice too.
Thank you, Kaylin. Yeah, no, and
One question I was
agree.
wondering is, are we talking about the same age group? Because preschool normally means infant toddlers, 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, who are just developing language and acquisition skills and abilities. So I think um, the way you look at a child, the perspective of how you view a child's voice would have to change, because you can't ask a toddler or a 2-year-old, you know, those types of questions that to indicate whether they actually enjoyed an experience. You have to more so look at a child's voice as being development, milestones, safety, quality of care, to determine the child's voice. So, for example, a toddler's voice would be if your toddler's coming home from preschool with diaper rash every day, then now the voice of that toddler is, I'm not being, my daily care is not being maintained. I'm not getting my diaper changed, or I'm not being potty trained properly, or something. So I think if you look at the child's voice in terms, in those terms, yes, you would look at that. But I don't think you can really get a child's voice in that such a young age, because number one, they don't know, and you're leaving it up to the parent to make that decision. And then that way, it's a more universal, because whether they're being cared for at home, or whether they're being cared for in a program, or whether they're getting services, those things are more universal to look at and include, as opposed to trying to view voice as how we would view it for an older child with language skills.
Yeah, completely agree. I was thinking more of, so I'll just put an example out there. I'm a foster parent. I had a Black foster child during COVID who I put in a preschool. During COVID, I wasn't allowed because of all the safety procedures. And so I would ask him questions, and he asked me, why doesn't anybody look like me? And I didn't even think about it. I just put him in the same preschool my other foster kids went to. And I was like, wow, I really need to, I wasn't able to go in, so I didn't see what the class structure looked like. I didn't see, but he was the only Black student there. And so that kind of sets an image in his head, you know, why am I standing out? And so we switched preschool, so he had kids that looked like him and he felt more comfortable. So for me, that was kind of getting his voice, I guess. I'm not going to ask him, you know, or it's very hard questions, just things that he told me. I was able to say, you know, this is your voice. I'm happy you told me that. Let's find somewhere where you like better and you're more comfortable. So I definitely wasn't thinking go into depth or anything with kiddos' voices. And, you know, it may not be their voice, but like you said, the diaper rash, that's, you know, that's their way of showing their voice. And so sorry, didn't mean to crack open a can of worms.
No, you do not need to apologize. I think these are like important to have these conversations, right? Because I think you're still bringing up the point of like this. We need to. I think this is also like all the different layers of people that are impacted are going to give you a different perspective on the child's experience. And I think you bring up a really good point, Kimberly. Also, like, because children are so young, it is so important that the families be engaged, because sometimes children can't speak, you know, for themselves, and so you kind of have to get that perspective from parents, families, and then teachers, providers. Vicky, you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you. I just want to share and a little bit of information around the first question about which group of families are most affected, directly impacted. And I live on the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe, a tribal reservation. And I think about the Native American children who and families who are affected directly, and especially when we look at you know, what's available for preschool or education opportunities, and families that may live in poverty, and that and lack of resources and opportunity. And I just think that these families are also impacted. So I just wanted to bring that to light.
Thank you,
And then
Vicky.
I wanted to mention, like, number 3, whose voice should Collaboration X acknowledge. I really think it's important that the relationship building and connecting with the parents and families, and also being and learning and understanding, being open to understanding the cultural aspects of all the different communities that you work with, because that really makes a difference in how you're going to engage parents and families into the educational system.
Thank you, Vicky, for sharing that. And you're definitely right. Like that's why Illinois is has really taken up that model of local collaborations in local regions, because every community looks different, every demographic group, they're different. And you're right. And so some of the when I just want to share kind of like the way I would look at it as well. So particularly Collaboration Act, wants to increase like their preschool enrollment, which tends to be like what, preschool age 3, 4. And so then the that are most affected, like I think sometimes we do we have different ways of looking at things, right? It's like, okay, who's affected? All families. Yes, they're all directly impacted. All families who are going to be age 3 by September 1st and not enrolled in preschool, like those are directly impacted. But if we're talking about who's the most impacted, we suggest starting with those groups that have the lowest participation rate and also outcomes. So anytime that you look at your data and you see that a demographic group is there's a disparity either in like how the rate of participation enrollment in a program, or if they're going to preschool but they're still not being prepared or not ready for kindergarten, there's a mismatch, right, of the needs and the services. Something's not connecting. And so then hearing input from particularly the families for Community X that are in the Latinx group and the children living in poverty who are not in programs, and those who are in programs are experiencing lower outcomes, like that's where I would recommend Collaboration to kind of really focus on. Because sometimes we're like, we want to increase preschool, we want to increase preschool enrollment, or just kind of any type of enrollment, and then we're like, let's go ask the preschoolers who are in the program about their experiences. But we know, and that's easier because you know where to find them, they're already in the program. But what might shed more light on the problem is actually going after those children who are not in the program, right? And then who's directly serving or connected to those most affected, definitely like preschool programs and providers who can give you the feedback on like, okay, like I am not a part of those families. I am not the child, but I interact with the child enough in the family that I might have some insight on their experiences. And also like, you know, if you have resources left in terms of time, you might want to consider hearing from all families, even the ones that aren't in preschool, to say, okay, like you're in preschool, you know, maybe Latinx families who are in deep poverty who are in preschool, and you might want to just learn about what made you, you know, what was your experience, and like what appealed to you, or why are you in this program, so that maybe you can reach families. But I think sometimes we do start like with the folks that are already in, you know, already in the programs, when we want folks that are disconnected from the system. And then so we do suggest, and you know, starting wherever you can, right? I think you can do like a broad net of like, you know, we want all children to go to preschool for like that scenario, and we're going to outreach to those families that have even more of a disparity, right, in access and outcomes. And some ways to figure out, you know, like we get an idea, we have an idea of, you know, the different demographic groups in our area, but it's also helpful to look at data. And in the state of Illinois, the Early Learning Council every 3 years has these long discussions about what they call priority populations. Have you all heard of them? They're not, I mean, yeah, like they're not all inclusive, but they're really good starts to look at, you know, the families that consistently and historically are left out of the system, or not. We're not seeing those outcomes. We're not seeing those participation rates. And so, you know, depending on how confident you feel with data, I would suggest looking at your data and really grabbing that flashlight and looking at your priority populations to see, you know, even if you have a low preschool participation rate, like out of all those groups, look at all of the priority populations to see if there is a disparity, and start there. And the reason why I'm sharing this too is like Kristen put in the chat 2 documents. The first document is an updated list of priority populations. So those groups in the state of Illinois that early childhood stakeholders have identified as not having access to the system, that we can do better at serving them. But sometimes when you look at data, it's not directly like apparent which data point you want to be looking at. So like say right here, you're hearing or you're learning that like parents with children with disabilities or that are not neurotypical are not ready for kindergarten. And so when you go look at your data, wherever that is, you know, like you're not going to get a data point that says like children with, you know, disabilities. You'll need to like look at the data point that gives you either like children with early intervention, or children with like IFSP. Like here go all my like alphabet soup. And so we also shared another document that we actually came up with that lists all the priority populations, and then it gives you an idea for the data point that corresponds to that. So if you want to find, you know, like again, children with disabilities, then it tells you like look at this data point. If you want to find out like families in poverty, look at that data point. I just thought it might be helpful, so we're sharing it with y'all. So then, once you figure out what it is that you want to learn, figure out who is best positioned to give you insight on the issue who's most directly impacted, then moving forward to consider like, so where do we find these groups of families? And I have heard like I've had a conversation with folks that are like, we don't want to put groups, we don't want to like generalize the whole demographic groups, right? Like, because it doesn't feel good. Like, oh, just say like Latinx, students aren't doing well. Like just kind of looking just at their deficit. We're not looking at their strengths. And to that, I just want to briefly say that that we're not going to solve some of these racial inequity issues if we don't name them. And so, for the purpose of also like finding out how different groups are experiencing the system, because we know these systems are experienced differently. We know there's a history of harm and like racial inequity and different levels of privilege. It is recommended actually to see to address different demographic groups, to see if there's any patterns and like how certain cultures or race or ethnicities are being are experiencing the system. I just want to say that. And then consider like again, once you prioritize which population or demographic of populations you want to hear from, thinking through as a group, right? Like in a meeting, like where can you find these families? Who has existing relationships with them and can connect you? And then also meeting, parents where they're at, whether it be doing some door knocking at their homes, going out to do outreach at events, public spaces, local schools during pickup or drop off, faith-based locations, wherever families are. And I do want to also highlight that in your handouts, on the first page, you'll see an example of a plan to reach targeted families. And it just kind of goes through how a conversation about your targeted populations, where you can reach them and who can connect you, might look like, right? So on page 1 of your handouts, it says, if the targeted population is families with 3 and 4-year-olds who are living in poverty and not enrolled in preschool, you might think of where can we find them, right? WIC office, public aid office, and then not only where can you find them in partners, like are there spaces where folks already have relationships, spend a lot of time, are they concentrated? On the handout, Kristen, can you put the handout again? Or the activity guide, its name is activity guide. And being leveraging those existing relationships and asking folks if they can connect you, or even going to the spaces themselves where folks can be found at. So 11:21, y'all get a 10-minute break. And I'll see you at 11:32. So the next step is choosing what methods you will use to collect the input and who can interact. Yes, so again, you've identified what you want to learn, who might help you get more insight on what you want to learn, where you might find them, leveraging some of those relationships, and then go on to choose now, like, okay, how are we gonna listen or hear back from families? We're gonna do another breakout group. So we're gonna do a quick, it's gonna be like a quick definition match in the Jamboard. Okay. So we're gonna give you all 8 minutes to match the definitions with what they are in terms of the method. So Kristen or Armand, can you put the link? Yes. So we're gonna ask you to pay attention to what breakout group you are, and then pick the different page on the Jamboard. So let me just show you real quick. So here on the left side, as you can see here, this is for breakout group 1. You can navigate between the different sheets right here by using these little arrows at the top. And each breakout group is going to have their own sheet. So for here, really what you're doing, and you'll see in the example, on these little red arrows are a list of different methods to get input from families. And what we're asking you to do is to just match them with the definition. So you can left click on the definitions, and like debate as a group where you want to put them and match them next to the method, right? So for example, surveys, we give you a freebie. Surveys are a list of questions aimed at collecting data for analysis, and they can be online or on paper. There's like a quick definition match in your breakout group. So Armand, we're gonna have 5 breakout groups then?
It'll be 10 breakout groups.
10. Okay, 10, because we do have a pretty big group. So breakout groups 1 to 5, you'll want to use the first link, and then 6 to 10, you're going to be using a different. Can you put the 6 to 10 link up in the chat, Armand? Thank you. So yeah, just feel free to go into your breakout groups, move around the definitions, and see where they land. Any questions?
I joined late. Which breakout group would you like me to join?
So we will go ahead, Armand.
We haven't opened the breakout rooms yet. So you'll be prompted to join once we open them.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so we'll have about 8 minutes. And are there any questions? All right, so have fun in your breakout group, which Armand just told us are different from last time, so you get to talk to different folks. If you finish early, you can connect.
Hi, would it be possible for me to get to breakout room 6?
Mom? Armand's working on it.
Thanks.
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay. So who wants to share their group answers?
So my name is Autumn. I was in group 8 and we agreed that focus groups match best with E, small meetings match best with C, one-on-one meetings match best with F, using established contacts match best with 8A, excuse me, and parent cafes matched best with B.
Does everybody else agree? I think yeah, I looked and everybody does. Were there any questions or any like surprises or anything that came up in the discussion? And I was just telling you know, Kristen and Armand that I do feel like I'm preaching to the choir, which I don't know if it makes me like sad because like you all already like know this and I'm preaching to you, or if it makes me happy because it means that we're really doing this, and that makes me happy. So just an activity group to, I mean, a short activity to get familiar with different methods for getting input from families. Is there anything that you've used that wasn't listed in my method that you feel like has worked for you? Just wondering if we're missing any. Let us know in the chat. If not, that's fine too. I do not believe to know everything about these methods, so I'm always hoping to learn from you all too. So let's just, okay, I hear unmute it. All right, it was a false alarm. Okay, so just wanting to go then, I'm gonna go through surveys, one-on-ones and focus groups in terms of like advantages or disadvantages. And then we're gonna do a quick little game. For surveys, like what are some advantages for using surveys to get feedback from families or other stakeholder groups? Ooh, I see Kimberly is going to try open forum discussion. Advantages, confidentiality, yes. That's quick and easy, yes. I definitely agree with you. It's wide reaching, right? And it's great to use when your target demographic group is kind of dispersed, and you know, and they're when they're not geographically concentrated either. You know, in some of our communities, because of gentrification or because you know we're just discrimination and a lot of segregation, different demographic groups are like concentrated on in certain parts of the neighborhood and you know in certain like housing areas, or you can find them kind of concentrated in particular programs or different places. The advantage of a survey is if you don't know exactly where to reach or prioritize folks, like I always think of a survey kind of like the water that creeps into the cracks and just finds, you know, all these different groups, hopefully. It can more accurate information if we listen to the concerns, and they can show you different outcomes than what we originally thought. Yeah. A good thing about a survey is that hopefully families can fill it in like 5 to 10 minutes. You don't, you know, you're not asking for a lot of time commitment. Oops. The disadvantages, right? Survey fatigue. How many surveys haven't we filled out through the pandemic? And So families are getting kind of tired of filling out so many surveys. You can get surface level responses of just like, you know, I don't know if y'all have had that experience, but you put out a survey and then like 2 answer questions or whatnot, right? Is like folks are not for open-ended, or if they don't understand the questions. And then in terms of, and this is, I'm going through advantages, disadvantages, and resources to consider because I do think it's important. These are important factors when you're planning what method to use in what order, or when, or what method fits the needs of what you're trying to do. And then of course, resources to consider, like whether or not you have like a survey tool, or you're going to do paper, translation, and then if you provide incentives, it's harder to provide incentive for such a, you know, like wide reaching tool, but there are things where like you can raffle off, every certain amount of surveys, like for every 30 surveys, like the 30th survey gets something, or just raffle something that you're drawing, something incentive, or give away a book or a toy to each person that fills out a survey. Focus groups, what are some advantages of those when we're thinking from one method to the next? Qualitative data, intentional targeting, yes. You could dig a lot deeper, right? You really can dig and get more in-depth responses, get more context. They're really great for hearing from families who are concentrated in a particular location. Yes, priority populations, you hear direct from the source. And all of these methods are a way to hear directly from the source. But yeah, I mean, you don't, it's like you have a very intimate conversation, right, with those directly impacted. And in terms of time commitment, you know, I think a family can attend a focus group of an hour and a half or 2 hours, and hopefully it isn't asking like too much of them. People with similar circumstances can feel safer speaking to their peers as opposed to the general population. Yeah. It can, yeah, you can create a focus group if done intentionally, like a safe space where folks can really have time to reflect. And then when you know, when you hear what your neighbors are talking about, that can kind of get some of your thoughts going as well. And I definitely have seen when I carried out focus groups, you know, that being a helpful dynamic for having like these honest conversations. Thank you. It is a little hard, like when you're thinking about focus groups, to disaggregate the results, right? If you have a group of families and it's like a diverse group, it's gonna be hard to figure out like what demographic group experiences are different unless you are, you know, targeting all like one group. Like for example, if a parent talks about ways, like barriers to support their child who, you know, may be in a wheelchair, and making sure that you are disaggregating that particular need barriers are associated with like that particular demographic group, sometimes it's a little challenging. And then resources and considerations, you know, time commitment, staff availability, incentives provided, because it is a little longer, like an hour and a half to 2 hours. It is recommended to offer like a stipend, as you would for, you know, maybe like hearing from a consultant or something like that. And then logistics. I have carried out focus groups over Zoom, but there is just so much better in person, right? And so I know some of our communities are also really oversaturated, and then it's like hard to find spaces, different things like that, but definitely doable. And then one-on-one meetings, focus group, Region 54, that's awesome. And then one-on-one meetings, advantages, you can really dig in deep. You get a high depth of responses, strengthen strategic relationships, and also address sensitive situations, right? Like, and there's some, I know we're talking about family engagement, but if we're talking about like that secondary impact, we are trying to engage also like providers, and you could send a survey to a provider and be like, why aren't, with questions that might be interpreted and taken a little like to heart, or you can sit down, have a conversation, give some context, and not only cultivate new relationships, but maintain your current relationships. We know politics, can get a little tricky, and so a one-on-one meeting is a really good way to make sure that there's no miscommunication. And then building buy-in. Oh, nice. And do you want to share about your focus group?
I can, yeah. Thanks, Janet. Because we are, we cover 5 counties. It's a really big region. And so I wanted to meet with the school superintendents, but I knew they would not all travel to one place. Nobody has time for that. And so we did it over Zoom, and it went really well. And I think one of the advantages to Zoom, especially not with this group necessarily, but with some groups, is the ability to have a little bit of some privacy, some anonymity. You can turn your camera off if you want. You can be on mute. You can type it in the chat instead of saying it out loud. So I think that people are becoming so used to these virtual spaces that sometimes, not always, but sometimes it actually works better to do it in a virtual space.
Thank you, Anne. That's a really good point. Yeah, and these are just some, of the methods and advantages and disadvantages. I feel like we could probably have a whole conversation about it. But I guess what is sometimes helpful is to figuring out when to use one method over another. And so we're playing this game called Which Method Fits Their Needs. So Collaboration Y, do you all like my very creative naming of collaborations and groups? Collaboration Y is planning to engage families in the role of family and community expert, which means they want their input. And they want to do like a check-in with children of, with young children, my bad on the typo, with young children and families of young children and their overall early childhood needs, preferences, and obstacles. So they're going to do a temperature check, broad strokes, and their goal is to reach as many families as possible with children ages 0 to 8. Which method fits their needs best? Surveys, one-on-one conversations, focus groups, or other? Alicia, we're seeing some A's, surveys. Those are too good. Okay, yes, I think definitely I think surveys are a good place to start. I think then, and the thing, right, is that you don't have to just pick one. You could do one to start or one to fit a particular need in one round of input, right? And then a Collaboration Y might then learn something that they want to dig in a little deeper, and then like choose a focus group, for like the second round. Well, thank you. How about this one? Collaboration Z is interested in learning how to better support Congolese refugees. The local refugee resettlement agency has offered to help connect the collaboration to the refugee group, which regularly attend workshops in their building. Collaboration Z has funds for parent incentives, but is limited in staff and capacity. Sorry, here, Maria, you're saying survey, but you need to see the results to trust us. Yes. Okay, Amanda, so also like following up of like, would you be interested in a focus group? And then you could build a focus group. That's great feedback. So we're saying focus group, focus group. So for the folks that are saying focus group, does anybody want to share what led you to choose that, or one-on-one conversation? All right, we're running out of time, so I'm just gonna have to go. Yeah, I think you definitely could go any which way. But I would say, you know, you have a relationship that you can leverage in a space, and they can give you space in their building where like these families are already located. You're also limited in staff, so then the one-on-one conversation might take a really long time. So I would say, yes, targeted responding groups make sense to focus groups and provide incentives. Awesome, thanks. I know we're running out of time, so just, you know, just choosing the method that fits your needs. When you're considering who to engage, you know, consider building up a peer-to-peer outreach, which is actually the one of our next trainings is going to be on outreach ambassador, and that'll really focus on how to prepare a cohort of parents to do that peer-to-peer outreach. Power dynamics, whether or not, you know, like the optional anonymity, like it's a tension, right? Because it's like I want to be able to, if you're willing, follow up with you if I have additional questions, but I also want to give you anonymity. And then making sure that whoever's interacting with parents, whether if it's even a survey, right, that like that the introduction, that the people are prepared to kind of explain what it is and are explained to carry out the interaction. For planning for success, again, like when setting your timeline, I suggest like planning backwards, and then taking into consideration like weather, you know, program, school schedules, holidays, internal staff, internal timelines, and staff availability. So I'm just gonna leave these like parent-friendly questions here. Some recommendations, but I also want to point out that our data and knowledge manager came up with parent engagement questions that are it's a bank that you can look into and then recycle or use as a template and or kind of tailor to fit your needs. And I think you know, they're questions that have been used in a few different projects, and I think she did a really good job. So sharing them with you in case they're helpful. So I know we're at time. Just wanted to point out that in the PowerPoint, there's some recommendations on kind of making sure you're giving yourself enough time to get the word out and to invite parents, because we can do a great job at setting up all of our ducks in a row. But if parents don't come, then, you know, we're still not hearing from them. And then, of course, I just want to leave you all with, once you finish just deciding, you know, going back to the same questions that you started off with, the ones you wanted to answer, and asking yourself, did you learn everything you set out to learn? And did you engage all the parent groups? Because, you know, sometimes we're like, yeah, well, we tried to engage that group, but we look at the data and see, did we? And if the answer is yes, then you may be ready to kind of take all those lessons and really use it into your community change systems work. If it's no, you may want to reconsider another round of parent input. And then you all talked about, you know, just making sure that that we are doing something with it, and that we let families know that their input is making a difference. And I think, and that's it for today. I know that I feel like it's like I'm kind of, again, like you all are doing really good work and you know a lot about this stuff, and it makes me really happy because this is like I feel like the least we can do in terms of engaging families, right? Is to get their input and their work, and then make sure that we use it. That's it for today. I invite you to fill out an evaluation. We're constantly, trying to improve the work that we do, and it's been a pleasure to be here with you. I'll stick around too if there's any questions, comments, concerns, or conversations. Or if y'all want to talk to each other, I know that y'all have some stuff coming up, and it might be good to check in with each other. Thank you.